一切惶惶众生起，祈愿不复现于世。如鬼子手压死救，一刹那身心一流，数数所命并同一，祈愿不复现于世。不如阎罗口齿疾，种种文明丧胆病，一日文火常热温，莫要伤害中有情。8万害人归美丽，360应说归命，440等等病，莫要伤害中有情。个个令身心不舒，4大不调诸苦处，身强体魄精气神，无病长寿享乐福。上师三宝大悲力，空行护法大雄力，因果不虚真实力，回向祈愿尽成就。祈愿喜业生气之，鬼魅不多并绕之，一切惶惶众生起，祈愿不复现于世。如鬼子手压死救，一刹那身心一流，数数所命并同一，祈愿不复现于世。阎罗口齿疾，种种文明丧胆病，一日文火常热温，莫要伤害中有情。8万害人归美丽，360应说归命，440等等病，莫要伤害中有情。个个令身心不舒，4大不调诸苦处，身强体魄精气神，无病长寿享乐福。上师三宝大悲力，空行护法大雄力，因果不虚真实力，回向祈愿尽成就。祈愿喜业生气之，鬼魅不多并绕之，一切惶惶众生起，祈愿不复现于世。如鬼子手压死救，一刹那身心一流，数数所命并同一，祈愿不复现于世。不如阎罗口齿疾，种种文明丧胆病，一日文火常热温，莫要伤害中有情。8万害人归美丽，360应说归命，440等等病，莫要伤害中有情。个个令身心不舒，4大不调诸苦处，身强体魄精气神，无病长寿享乐福。上师三宝大悲力，空行护法大雄力，因果不虚真实力，回向祈愿尽成就。 我嘛南瓜的年辈心间他们姐，那么三个人不起来就诉求，三个学单跟对那么来就诉求，那么也他们看着说来就诉求，让什么东西去给过来就诉求，嘛南瓜的年辈心间他们姐。那么三个人不起来就诉求，三个学单跟对那么来就诉求。那么也他们看着说来就诉求，让什么东西去给过来就诉求。嘛南瓜的年辈心间他们讲，那么三个人不起来就诉求，三个学单跟对那么来就诉求。那么也他们看着说来就诉求，让什么东西去给过来就诉求。我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边。我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有。我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有。我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边，我嘛那边，我嘛那边，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有。我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边没有，我嘛那边，我嘛那边没有。夜当路
Thank you.
我了诵念了写的哪一道？
We will begin with the opening prayers.
七九对摩对波音，吹之波罗波多所。
Now, can you all hear me? First of all, I would like to all of you who are listening over the internet, all the lamas, the chulkus, the spiritual friends, the members of the Sangha and the monasteries, and particularly the nuns and the nunneries, as well as all of our Dharma friends, male and female, who are listening around the world, as well as my friends and relatives in Tibet. I'd like to offer you all my greetings. For the last few days, I was unable to give the teaching. The main thing was that I wasn't feeling so well, and then in addition to that, and for a couple of days, I wasn't able to really speak very well. And so I had a little bit of some problems and some sores in my mouth, and it wasn't comfortable, and so I wasn't able to give the teachings. And so today is the last day of our teaching. You can say the 13th day of the Arya Shema Spring Teaching. It's the last day. So the place where we're leaving the MIKYÖ DORJE's autobiographical verses, good deeds, the place we've left it is the 20th. And I think it's okay not to speak about the 21st. We won't speak about that. So the 21st speaks about the topic of ultimate bodhicitta. What we've been speaking about up to now is relative bodhicitta. So the 21st teaches about ultimate bodhicitta. So the relative bodhicitta was, then after that, it speaks about how to practice the path in connection with the six transcendences. So next year we'll begin with the 21st. And I think that next year we will certainly, probably be able to finish the autobiographical versus good deeds. I think I shall finish it. And after I've finished the autobiographical versus good deeds and usage thoroughly, and so then after that, what I should do, you should all have discussions and think about what it is that might be of interest to you, and so then we will discuss that. So I'd like to speak about a particular situation related with MIKYÖ DORJE's liberation. The other day, I thought I'd speak with you a couple of different situations. And so for one thing, I wasn't feeling so on. The other thing is that these events are not so difficult. So it's not like you have to look through many different texts. There's none that has like a single just summary of it. So it's very difficult to research them. Within MIKYÖ DORJE's liberation story, I thought I'd speak about the topic of the reincarnation of the Shammar Rinpoche. And I did in the past, I did find an old manuscript once. I did get this old document, but now I can't find it. I don't know where it's gone to. No matter how much I search for it, I can't find it. There are a lot of texts that I have in my mind, but it doesn't have one place of this. So, but I don't remember exactly what is in the mind. So next year, it's probably better to speak about that next year. So today, what I'd like to speak to with you about today is related to MIKYÖ DORJE's deeds and liberation, and in particular, now that we're having the spring teaching for nuns, I'd like to speak about something connected with the nuns. Now, as you all know, a few years ago, there were several conferences in Dharamsala about the topic of the bhikkhuni ordination. And in relation to that, I received from someone, I think maybe it was Electong, I received a document by Tsile Natsar Rangdro. And so we looked through that, and as I looked through that, I found that just when I saw that, it's like we were just surprised by it. Oh, what we were surprised by is that it describes how MIKYÖ DORJE gave bhikkhuni vows. And so this is the topic that it speaks about. Now, the title of this text is, first of all, I'd like to show you the manuscript. I'll show you the text. And so the text is the history of how the teachings were established at the three Tsele monasteries. And so what it says here is that Lady Jetsuma Kunjutsoma received full ordination from Lord MIKYÖ DORJE and became a bhikkhuni. She observed all the rules meticulously and without any fault. She taught over 100 nuns at the Shokang nunnery, living a long life and perfecting her practice. She became venerated by everyone in the region of Daklung. So this is what it reads. So here when he says Lord MIKYÖ DORJE, of course there are many MIKYÖ DORJEs in Tibet, but at this time, the one of this time should probably be understood as KARMAPA MIKYÖ DORJE. Because the three monasteries of Tsele were all related to MIKYÖ DORJE. Now, what we need to be observed here is this is not just that MIKYÖ DORJE gave the full ordination. Another thing that we need to be surprised about is that So other than this writing by Tse Nasrandal, there's not even a mention of this topic of giving bhikshuni ordination in any other text, not even in MIKYÖ Dorje's own autobiographies or any in writings by any others. There's not a single mention of it. And so that's something that we should find surprising. Usually, it's something that it's not something we'd ever seen before. And so when we saw this text by Tsele, then we once again began to consider what the connection between MIKYÖ Dorje and the bhikshuni ordination. We had to think about it in a new way and to begin new research into it. If it was just that we hadn't paid attention before and not noticed that, but there are many points in the MIKYÖ Dorje in the past we weren't paying attention, but if we do pay attention, there are many points, both major and minor, related to the bhikshuni ordination and MIKYÖ Dorje's collected works. Now, of course, in his text on the Vinaya, there are the Vinaya commentaries. There are the discussions of the precepts of bhikshus and bhikshunis, as well as the precepts of the novice monks and nuns. But this is not on all. It's also the quest that there. We also found some important things that we need to pay attention to in terms of how he actually practiced in his lifetime or how he remembers. In any case, in 2004, I think it was 2004, I don't quite remember. But when I was reforming the codes for conduct of the Kaji Mulam, and I'm pretty sure it was 2004. So when we were reforming the codes of conduct, I was reading a lot of texts on Vinaya rituals. How do you make offerings? How do you put on your Dharma robe? How do you spread out your mat? Well, how we're putting in the Varanasi. It's like, how do you spread your mat? How do you wear your Dharma robe? And we spoke about this quite a bit then, right? So at that time, I was able to see a text on Vinaya rituals by the 8th KARMAPA. And when I saw that, at that time, I first began to pay attention to get some interest in the topic of bhikshunis. Likewise, within the Kaji Mulam, we prepared a special seating area for the bhikshunis. And also when we did the conjured profession, we had both bhikshus and bhikshunis. When we had the alms procession, we had both bhikshus and bhikshunis. And so the main cause for that was this particular text. This text on the rituals, on the Vinaya rituals. Now, what I saw in that particular text by MIKYÖ Dorje and the Vinaya rituals that was so particular was, I think, is that first of all, if I show you with the title of the text and show you a related passage to it, I think you'll get a good idea of what it is. Now, the title of the text is a presentation of the motions of the Sangha, motions for individuals related to the Sangha, and motions for individuals. So this is called, the accomplishing meaning through seeing. And what the meaning of this is, and so the basic saying that the practice of the rituals for women cannot be practiced in these days. So if a woman wishes to take full ordination, it is appropriate or okay to give full ordination according to the ritual for men. The reason for this is that the bhikshuni vows primarily arise on the independence upon the male bhikshu sangha. And when there is a ritual for the women, then it is by gathering the dual sangha, the bhikshus and bhikshus, and this is merely just the appropriate way according to the tradition. And so, in terms, this is proper in the way things look good and proper on the external level. And the reason for this is that, as it says in the sutra, and the sutra it says is the minor sayings. It says, bhikshunis are fully ordained by the bhikshus and are granted by the Vedas. And this is explained in the long commentary, and that is the one by the Chugi Chenyan. And so the gathering of the bhikshuni sangha is merely according to the tradition or appearances. But also its actions performed by the bhikshus and the bhikshunis when done by others are not unaccomplished. Therefore, Therefore, the rituals for bringing women forth and giving them full ordination on the basis of the rituals for men are mostly similar as for men. The few differences may be filled in and stated. And in any case, in this text on the rituals by MIKYÖ DORJE, the main point is that because there is no Bhikshuni Sangha in Tibet, if there are women who wanted to become Bhikshunis and take the Bhikshuni vows, then the male Bhikshu Sangha is allowed to give the women's vows. And the ritual you should use be based on the ritual for the men, but there are a few passages that need to be altered slightly. So instead of you'd say saying the word navasmank, you say navasnan, and so forth. You have to change a few points. And so you should change them. He said, and yeah, actually, and he showed actually how to convert the male ritual into the one for women. And so this is actually present in MIKYÖ DORJE's text on Vinaya rituals. So when I first saw this text, I had not yet seen the text I was yet to see the text by Tsele Naksarandral. And at that time, I didn't even have any thought in my head that MIKYÖ DORJE had given the Bhikshuni vows. But it did occur to me that he must have given some thought to this matter. And so for after that, I thought of what he gave, so it's how they gave me. So he must have thought about this a bit. Later, when I saw that this historical document by Tsele Naksarandral that said that MIKYÖ DORJE had given Bhikshuni vows, it seemed to me that he probably gave the Bhikshuni ordination with that very same ritual in his collection of Vinaya rituals that he had altered from the ritual for men to a ritual for ordaining women. Now, other than this passage by Tsele Naksarandral, there are very few other sources about MIKYÖ DORJE giving Bhikshuni vows, and so we cannot settle it 100% that he gave the Bhikshuni ordination. So we can't determine that 100%. But if we continue to pay some attention to it, it is probably very clear that there are students of the KARMAPA MIKYÖ DORJE who were Bhikshunis. This is very clear. The reason is that there's the Mahagala practice we always do, and there's the Madagma practice, the impure world is purified into emptiness and so forth. And so it's kind of a strange name for this, actually. And so some of the main is like the Tibetan we call it impure, and so it's the impure prayer. But there's a tradition of giving names like this by taking the first few words of the words, and then you give the names like the Vajradhara prayer, the Madagma prayer, and so forth. And so we're going to talk about this. If we look at the colophon of this text, actually, what it says is written by the Jetsun KARMAPA MIKYÖ DORJE at the request of Rinchen Palmo. Likewise, there is also a text called Selected Prayers in the MIKYÖ DORJE Collected Works. And what it says in the colophon for that, it says, composed by KARMAPA MIKYÖ DORJE, MIKYÖ Sambo Dorje Gawayang at the request of Rinchen Palmo, who is Richard V. So here Rinchen Palmo's name appears twice, or the two occasions. Now, the name Rinchen Palmo itself only indicates that it's a female student, but there's really nothing else that it means. So if you think in that way, then, if we look at the colophon's other texts that she requested, though, then we can see that Rinchen Palmo was just not anyone. In the text title, there's a text that we can find called The Light of Profound Sections, the Uncommon Meditation of Guru Vajrasattva. And so this is in the 100 short expressions. What its colophon says is that this uncommon meditation on the Guru Vajrasattva from the oral tradition of Gyalwang Karmapa was written as a few notes as a reminder about the meditation. The Shakya Bhukchinu, the faithful and devoted mind, the Rinchen Palmo. And so Rinchen Palmo was not just anyone. It's clear that she was a Bhikshuni. But what's disappointing at this point is that we don't have any detailed account of Bhikshuni Rinpoche's life. However, in the collected songs of Pao Tsula Trengwa, the long name is called The Garland of Secret Words, a Treasury of Vajra Songs. I got too busy, and when I get too busy, then it's hard to remember to put the periods in at the end of sentences sometimes. So what it says in Pao Tsula Trengwa's collected songs is that meditate on the main practice of Mahayana aspirational and engage to get to the main points of devotion, Guru Yoga, getting clear appearances of the deity in the creation phase, rest uncontrived and loose in the essence of meditation. Whatever appears purified into deity, mountain great bliss, without do not be attached to body or any possessions. Eject your consciousness, the letter A, into the sky. The essence of Dharma teachings is contained in these. Thus, I thought to write these notes on instructional advice I'd give to Lady Richard Palmo, who I did not have time to enroll only with these words. So when you look at this, what it seems is that at the beginning, Legend Lady was at first a noble woman. So she's a woman, a noble woman, and so she later became a bhikshuni. And I think that she was connected with Taklung, but it's difficult to say that. I can't say that definitively today. Later, I think I can examine it again in the future. In any case, when you say Rinchen Palmo and then in Sila Nautatanum it says Kuncho Palmo, are these two the same person or not? This is something we need to examine. So generally, when you think about it, in Sanskrit, we have the word Ratna. And if you translate it literally, it would be Rinchen. If you translate it according to the meaner, then it's Kuncho. So the meaning translation is Kuncho. And so they talk about the three jewels of the Kuncho Sum. So it's like, so you can choose between Kunchok and Rinchen. And so sometimes it's possible sometimes they might have said Rinchen and sometimes they would have called her Kunchok Palmo. It's possible that she could have been given a name like that, but it's not difficult to say definitively that it was her. Now, here when we look at this, now if Karmapa MIKYÖ DORJE had given the Bhikshuni ordination, then the person then he would have had to give, the question is, when he gave the Bhikshuni ordination, was it appropriate or was it correct or was it according to all the Vinaya rituals? And so to think about is what it's like. So generally we need to think about it in historical terms. There are two ways for women to become bhikshuni, either during the ordination with a dual sangha or through a single sangha. So there are these two different types. But the bhikshunis who appeared in Tibet were mainly ordained by single sangha. And I think if I get some of the historical background for this, I think it'll be helpful. And the first point is here that the first proof or the first background situation is that is about when you think about the initial spread of Dharma and how there were the first ordinations in Tibet. So now when you think about when did the Dharma first spread in Tibet, is during the time of King Senzin Gyaltsen. So some people say that it was according to other emperors, and there are many different explanations. But the most reliable source seems to comes from the time of King Senzin Gyaltsen. This is probably the most reliable source. This is because we have the edicts or the inscriptions, as well as the inscriptions on pillars from the Karchung and Samye temples. And so for those, I think we can see that during the time of the Emperor Senzin Gampo, Dharma spread in Tibet. So once the teachings had spread in Tibet, when did the monastic community develop? What it says in the inscription in Samye said, representations of the three jewels were built, And people from Tibet were also brought to liberation. So now this was the time of Trisung Jetsun. Now, how what's happened is when what it says on this pillar is that representations of the three jewels and people from Tibet were also brought to liberation. So to talk about brought to liberation means made to go onto the path of liberation, or they're brought forth or ordained. It's the people from Tibet also means that Tibetans were among the people who went forth. Likewise, within our Tanjura, there is in that there's the section of letters, right? I think this is on this in the section of letters. There was a letter sent summarizing what to cherish sent by Ba Peiyang. And what it says, in Tibet, there is not even the word bhikshu. And then the Lord Bodhisattva Trisung Detsun found the true Dharma. Can you hear me now? Lost my connection for a moment. More or less, I'm not certain where it lost. But I think if I was speaking about Peiyang, I think that's probably in the topic of Peiyang. So I lost the connection. So in the Tanjura, there's the letter sent by Ba Peiyang called Summarizing What to Cherish. What it says in the colophon to it, it says, in Tibet in the past, there wasn't even a word for the bhikshu. And then during the Lord Bodhisattva found the true Dharma, the glorious emperor aroused faith, and someone then went forth and the monastic name gave him the name Peiyang. So it's saying basically this is the first Tibetan monastic. Now, another proof of this is that there was an old chronicle of Ba found from Drepung. So this is the Chronicles of Ba are very old Tibetan history, but there are many different manuscripts for it. So there's an old Chronicles of Ba from Drepung. I think that this is one that was originally from the Gombotse Lagang. So what it says is that some histories, it's said that during the time of King Sunzangampa, the translator Sambodhan, Trigidza, and others went forth. But this is nonsense from people who just don't know when the 7 men for testing lived. So there's basically, it's not right. And it's refuting the person who said this. Now, if we look at this, it says that there are no monastics prior to Emperor Trisung Detsun. Even if there were, or if there were any monastics, they're Chinese monks or monastics from other regions, from like Nepal or other areas. But no Tibetan Sangha had developed. So when is it that it's generally accepted that Trisung monastics appeared? It was during the time of Trisung Detsun. Now, the Khenpo who gave the vows at that time was the Khenpo Bodhisattva, Shantarakshita. And the Toku, the vows are called the 6 men's for testings or the 7 men's for testing. There are different ways of explaining it. And this topic, and according to the old manuscript from that we found in Drepung of the Chronicles of Ba, or what it's written there is that on the full moon of the first month of spring of the year of sheep, the seven of Chim Shakyabhadra Tsangla to Power Berutsana Shang Labu. Shubakono Wayash Yambo went forth with the Shandarashta. So this is probably in 767, the year 767, the seven men for testing went forth, and only then was the monastic community found. Now, what is different in this, the specific thing is that he also gives a couple of stories that are mentioned there. And what he says is that actually Shantarakshita was actually from the Tamara Shatya school. Because he's from Tamara Shatya, what is commonly accepted in Tibet is that our lineage of vows is from the Mula Sarvastivada, but Shantarakshita was from the Tamara Shatya school. And so there are some people who said that actually they took an ordination from Dhanashila. And so that the seven men for testing actually translators in Padyeshe. And so in this way, the Padyeshe was the earliest of the Tibetan monk. So people say this. But this Chronicles text says that it refutes this, saying that the person who said this just did understanding of the seven men for testing. But what we can see for this is that there were people who had asserted that Shantarakshita was not the abbot who ordained them. But then, first of all, there was another one who ordained them. In any case, when we talk about these seven men for testing, there was the 6 men for testing. And when we know when they occurred, we can say when the monastic community was first founded. Now, in any case, at that time, we say, was it just that only men who went forth at that time and no women? Well, it's not the case, actually. There were men who went forth, and there were also women who went forth. And as I mentioned from this Chronicles of Ba that I mentioned, or this old history, Tibetan history, the Chronicles of Ba, now what it says in there is that, it says, then Karchen San, Chanchuche, went forth with 300 subjects. So that's that. Then following that, it says it quotes some documents and says that, it says in some historical documents, after Sangye was built, but before it was consecrated, Samyega had already been made, but it was before they had the opening ceremonies. And during that time, Ba Sanang went forth, and was given the name Yeshe Wangpo. And in the year of the sheep, now that was this year. This is that the date I gave before, 700 and, how much was it? What year was the date? 767. So after the year of the sheep, during the Losar of this year, 767, while they're doing the great consecration rituals, Warana was the abbot when Chen Chijel went forth with 100 sazins. And so they're giving two different situations in these Chronicles of Ba. In one of these, it says that Kachin San Janjache went forth with 300 subs. The other doesn't say it. But it doesn't say who the abbot was. Now, in quoting some of the some other documents, it says that the Kempo was the Bharatna. Now, for this reason, later in Tibet, there are many people who became well accepted that the first Kempo who ordained women in Tibet was Bharatna. So this is probably the way it's explained in the Chronicles of Ba, so it became well known. But later, there was an ancient Chinese manuscript found at the Dunhuang caves. And the title of this, if you translated it, I've translated a bit from it. And the name of the text is Ascertaining the Logic of the Mahayana Sudden Enlightenment. And what's written in here is that the Queen Tree Jemotsen had great faith and devotion from the very beginning and awakened realization an instant. She therefore cut off her deep black hair and wore the saffron-colored banner. The jewel of stainless discipline illuminated the mandala in her heart, and through the clear water of samadhi, she realized the nature of Zen. This deed cannot be exemplified even by a lotus unstayed by the mark. The master was skilled in means for taming beings, so he always taught the emperor's sister, Tri Nansa, and over 300 wives of ministers of the Mahayadhamma. They all went forth on one occasion. So what difference is there between her and Mahaprajapati? And so what it's saying in this text is there is King Chusoda's queen, Tri Jemotsen, and his niece, or aunt, Namsa. And likewise, there are over 300 knives, and all of them went forth. But now in this text, it's not clearly said that Kempo Mahayana was the abbot who ordained them, but he taught them the Dharma. And because it was his Dharma teachings that caused them to go forth, I think that there probably is a great connection between him and their ordination. And now we look at this ancient historical, the oldest Tibetan horoscope, the Chronicles of Bond, and the ascertainment that was found from Dunhuang. When you compare these two, you see that the first Tibetan bhikkhuni, the first Tibetan woman to go forth, was the queen of Emperor Chuson Dessen, Tri Jemotsen. Now, when we talk about this queen, Tri Jemotsen, if we think there are two other pieces of historical evidence about that we need to know about. The first of these is the inscription on the bell at the Samyagyagan temple, and the second is the one is the inscription on the bell itself. It's the bell itself, and this is the one at Samyagyagan temple and the one at Chagdut temple. So, like, there's an inscription written on the bell. So those are very clear, right? The bell that is a Samyagyagan temple was probably erected before Chuson Detsen's queen Tri Jemotsen went forth, and the one from Chagdut temple was probably done afterwards. This is the bell from the Samyagyagan temple. And so the bells of this size, what they're called in Tibet, they're called by the word chong in Tibet. This word was a word that was just taken from Tibetan. It's just in Tibetan it's called chung, and then it's been translated to Tibetan. They called it just chong. So these big bells in Tibetan are called chong. And so what's written on the inscription in this is that the Lady Queen, as an offering to the three jewels in the 10 directions, erected this bell. By the power of this merit, may Emperor Chuson Detsen, his princes and their wives, have voices, 60 qualities, and achieve an excelled enlightenment. And so it says she erected this bell, and because of this, it says that Chuson Detsen and the king, the queen and the princes are offered to the three jewels, made this offering, and they gave this bell. So there's this ancient bell. And so the sponsor was the queen Jemotsen. Then there's the bell from Chagdut temple. And what's written on the inscription on this is that now this bell was also very well known at the time of Tradition. It said, in order to inspire all sentient virtues, the sound of the gods that is heard in the sky, this bell is sponsored by the Chomo Shanship and cast by the Kambodja Bhikshur. And so what it's saying here is that this bell sponsor of the bell was Chomo Shanship. So after the Tri Jemotsen, the name she was given was Chanchu Yin. And so for that reason, we can say that this spell was made after she'd become a bhikkhuni. And so this is after the other one at Samyagyagan temple didn't have a temple. And so these two bells are evidence then this that the queen Tri Jemotsen, or the nun Chomo Shanship, was a very important historical figure. Now, in any case, whether the Kempo who ordained the queen and the other people was the Waratna, as according to in the Chronicles of Retinas, or as so in the Chronicles of Ba it said it's Baratna, but in the text from Don Huang it says that it indicates that it's probably Kempo Mahayana. Whoever it is, so it doesn't matter which of the two. It's fine either one. No matter which of the two was doing, but it's clear that the source for that the ordination was conducted by the male sangha. It was clearly not a dual sangha. Now another the source that says at first there are male bhikshus and there are female bhikshunis, and so there are both bhikshunis. There is a letter called the letter summarizing what the church by Balpayang. No, I don't need to. No, I've quoted from that before, right? This is the letter summarizing what the church sent by Balpayang that I mentioned earlier. What it says in this now to give instructions to the bhikshus, novices, and bhikshus who have gone forth. So in particular, he said that you should in particular give advice to the novices and the bhikshunis. He wrote this down in particular. And who the one he sent this to was the Tibetan subjects. So he was sending it to Tibetan subjects for that time. Because it's sending to Tibetan subjects, then it's clear that there were bhikshunis in Tibet. Because if there were no bhikshunis there would have been no reason to say to the Tibetan subjects that to speak about them, but bhikshunis. So for this reason, we can say that during the ancient spread of the teachings in Tibet, there were both male and female sanghas, and that the ordination was given by the male sangha. I think that this is fairly clear. And so now we will take a 30-minute intermission.
Nyambe Simjen Tamji Lama Sangye Rinpoche La Gyopsu Chiu Sangye Shedan Gindun Namla Gyopsu Chiu Lama Yedam Kandru Sola Gyopsu Chiu Rangsim Dongse Chege Gola Gyopsu Chiu Ma Namkada Nyambe Simjen Tamji Lama Sangye Rinpoche La Gyopsu Chiu Sangye Shedan Gindun Namla Gyopsu Chiu Lama Yedam Kandru Sola Gyopsu Chiu Rangsim Dongse Chege Gola Gyopsu Chiu Ma Namkada Nyambe Simjen Tamji Lama Sangye Rinpoche La Gyopsu Chiu Sangye Shedan Gindun Namla Gyopsu Chiu Lama Yedam Kandru Sola Gyopsu Chiu Rangsim Dongse Chege Gola Gyopsu Chiu Omani beme, 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 Omani beme. Omani Omane beme, 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 omane beme,
Amen.
等虚空一切如母有情，皈依佛宝上师，皈依佛法僧三宝众，皈依上师本尊空行众，皈依自心明空之法身。等虚空一切如母有情，皈依佛宝上师，皈依佛法僧三宝众，皈依上师本尊空行众，皈依自心明空之法身。等虚空一切如母有情，皈依佛宝上师，皈依佛法僧三宝众，皈依上师本尊空行众，皈依自心明空之法身。Om Mani Padme Hum, Om 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 Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum.心愿心业生起智贵美普多频绕之，一切惶惶众生起，祈愿不复现于世。如鬼子手压死救，一刹那身心一流，数数所命并同一，祈愿不复现于世。不如阎罗口持经，种种文明丧胆病，一日问或常热问，莫要伤害中有情，8万海 中有情，个个灵神心不属，四大不调诸苦处，身强体魄精气神，无病长寿享乐福。上师三宝大悲力，空行护法大雄力，因果不虚真实力，回向祈愿尽成就。祈愿喜业生起智，贵美不多并绕之，一切惶惶众生集，祈愿不复现于世。如贵自受亚斯求，一刹那身心一流，数数所命并动意，祈愿不复现于世。阎罗口齿疾，种种文明丧胆病，一日问火常热问，莫要伤害中有情。8万害人归美丽，360因着归命，440等等彼，莫要伤害中有情。个个灵神心不属，四大不调诸苦处，身强体魄精气神，无病长寿享乐福。上师三宝大悲力，空行护法大雄力，因果不虚真实力，回向祈愿尽成。祈愿喜业生起智，贵美普多并绕之，一切惶惶众生集，祈愿不复现于世。如贵自受亚斯求，一刹那身心一流，数数所命并同意，祈愿不复现于世。如阎罗口齿疾，种种文明丧胆病，一日问火常热问，莫要伤害中有情。8万害人归美丽，360因着归命，440等等彼，莫要伤害中有情。个个灵神心不属，四大不调诸苦处，身强体魄精气神，无病长寿享乐福。上师三宝大悲力，空行护法大雄力，因果不虚真实力，回向祈愿尽成就。 남과다 냠베 심젠 탐지 라마 상게 림보체라 겹수시오 상게 쉐단 겐드윈 남라 겹수시오 라마 예담 칸드소라 겹수시오 랑심 동세 최게고라 겹수시오 마 남과다 냠베 심젠 탐지 라마 상게 림보체라 겹수시오 상게 쉐단 겐드윈 남라 겹수시오 Lama yedam kandru sola gyapsu sheo, rangsim dongse chege gola gyapsu sheo. Ma nam khada nyambe simjen tamje, lama sangye rinpo chela gyapsu sheo. Sangye chedan gindu namla gyapsu sheo, lama yedam kandru sola gyapsu sheo. Rangsim dongse chege gola gyapsu sheo. Omani beme, 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 omani beme. Omani beme, 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 Sotrone ye
Now, can you all hear me? Now, as I was describing, there is an account of Karmapa MIKYÖ DORJE giving a Bhikshuni ordination. And if he did give Bhikshuni ordination, then we have to think about, well, what is the background history behind this? Well, the background history is how the male and female people who went forth and how the bhikshus and bhikshunis were ordered. Now, the second historic background event is related to the later spread of the teachings in Tibet. And I think this is probably basically in the 10th century when the later spread of the teachings began in Tibet. So there is an ancient inscription by Lama Yeshe which says that if ladies were able to become bhikshunis, instead of stopping them, they should be sent to liberation and a dharma house should be built for them. This is what it says. And the meaning of this is that the wives of ministers and so forth, so these are some of the people in the higher levels, people on the high status, if their wives wish to become bhikshunis, then they should not be stopped. You should allow them to become bhikshunis. And for this, you should build temples and nunneries for them. And so there's this inscription giving this edict. Likewise, another piece of important evidence saying that there were bhikshunis at that time. There's a liberation story of Richard Samba by his student Janashri or Yeshe Bel. And what it says is that Richardson had 3 siblings, so including him, there were 4. The youngest of them was his little sister Shedab Tsomo, who became a bhikshuni. She studied the Tantric Dharma, and because of her practice of Tantra, she was able to achieve siddhis through her practice. She became known as the yogini Trigidronma. And so I think that this account shows that there were, clearly shows that there were bhikshunis at that time. Now, the third historical background story, this is now moving forward to the 13th century. There was Dogen Tripaka's father, Sangsa Sunam Jasam, and he had 5 or 6 wives. And the third of these was called Lachidmut, and her oldest daughter was ordained by the female master Sonam Bum, and she founded a nunnery called Jomoling. And it said that she had taken the bhikshuni vows, and so there's one account of that way. Likewise, Dogen Tripaka himself said as the abbot for 4,425 bhikshus, bhikshunis, novas and nuns, and peoples who went forth from Nepal, India, China, Western Asia, Mongolia, and Kauli. Kauli is an old name, but that's what we call these days. It's Korea. So in Korea and Chang and Uyghur and Shuzhen and other places. So basically, said that he had, was the abbot for 4,425 bhikshus and bhikshunis and novice monks and nuns. So both of these are included in the collection of historical documents compiled by Taksan Paljar Sampo called The Treasury of Documents to Please Scholars. That was compiled in 1434. But in any case, I think this proves that in the 13th century, there were bhikshus. Now, the fourth supporting account or event, so to the 13th century, there are the 5 scholars from Minyak, as they're known. Who are connected to the Karmapa Deshin Shekpa, and they're considered very important scholars. And among them was called Kashipurik Senge. And he followed the Vinaya master called Sunam Drak, who is from the same lineage of Buddha Rinpoche's Guru Jamga Namke Paun Tsi Dodzin. So he spread the Dharma widely in Spencer, and also went back into his own place in Western Xia. And in particular, he also is said to have about 100 bhikshunis among his students. And so this is and this is according to the Liberation story by his direct disciple, Seng Sang. Now, the 5th Vinaya master, or the fifth background story is in the latter part of the 15th century. There was a Vinaya master called Namkha Suna. And he was rather well known at that time. So he was the Kempo who ordained Chuo Rangjungmomo as a bhikshuni. And this event is described in Gorampa's dialogues, The Blooming Lotus. And so this is the fifth background of a supporting event. The 6th background or supporting event is that toward the end of the 14th century, there's a section of letters in the collected works of Rendaro Shunmudra. And among them, there's one called The Advice Letter of Yaro Chiba Sangbo. And what is written in there is that the Geshe-pam bought the letter of the Lady Bhikshuni along with the cape, and I rejoice. So it says then, and likewise at the end of the letter it says, this is advice from the child of the snow Le to the Bhikshuni Paul Sangmo. And so this is what it says, and when you look at these, I think with it even at that time, there were Bhikshunis at that time. In particular, the Bhikshuni was the Lady of Yadrok. And we've come to the 7th supporting back. And this is talking about the beginning of the 15th century. This is time there's a Sangin Dorje Pama. And she was basically the Sangin Dorje Pama, and she was basically the first Vajravarahi recognition. And so she was, sometimes she called Shakya Sama, called Zomo. And she was a student, anyway, she was a student of Budong Pension. Not only that, she first took the novice vows from Budong Pension. And after she'd taken the novice vows, she was called Ada Chugi Junme. Later, she once again took vows from Bodon Pension. She took the Bhikshuni vows. And at that time, then Bodon Pension was himself and so there was, Bodon Pension was the Kempo, and his sort of representative was the Pension. They brought in the other 10, enough of the Bhikshus to have the full Sangha, and they gave her the Bhikshuni ordination. And this is described in detail in Jesum Chugi Junme's life story of liberation. So I don't need to say too much about it now. That's a very interesting story there, where it says that, it says Chugi Junma, that after she became a bhikshun the next day, she was eating, she came to visit Bodon Rinpoche. He invited her to come and have lunch with him. And at that time, and so now she's been in a bhikshuni. So she had become a bhikshuni. So the next day, after she had taken the bhikshuni vows, she wore her full darkness. She brought her alms bowl. And he also had, she had an attendant who was also a novice nun, and she came along with him. They came to see Bodong Penchen. And they came to see Bodong Penchen, and then at that time, from the moment he saw them, he thought this bhikkhuni, she was really something, because really, she was really inspiring to see her. And so Bodong Penchen, when he saw Chökyi Trungpa coming to visit him, he started to smile, and what he said was, it's like, it said that arhats sometimes come down to the earth. Sometimes said, sometimes arhats come down to earth, and now it said that an arhati, a female arhat, has come down to the earth. It's like she'd come down from the sky. It's kind of like we talk about arhats coming from the sky, and so when you see a female arhat who's come down from the heavens, and so that when he saw her, and he was inspired to faith by this. And this is described in the, this is described very clearly in her liberation story. Now, the eighth supporting story was that at the beginning of the 15th century, there was a woman named Sangdao Shakti Budrenma. And she first went forth under the Vinaya Master Lobsang Pukpa and was called Shakajit. I think that she was, at first, she was a lay practitioner. And so then she went to Goya Kempo Sanjay Sambo and took a bhikkhuni introduction. She was given the name Shakya Sangmo. So this is the name that she was given. And when she took Dharma teachings from the Goya Kempo, in his or in her experience, it was actually like there was a crystal light made of light that appeared repeatedly inside her body. So she had this kind of vision of this. And so she said, I'm having this vision. And she asked the Kempo about it. And so the Kempo then rested in meditation for a few minutes. I think he's probably the one who did the practice of pacification. And so I think he's really something about practice. And so he spent some time in meditation. He said to her, you will bear a great being, or you will give birth to a great being who will uphold, preserve, and spread the teachings of the Buddha. In the past, in India, there was the Brahmin lady Sayadaw Sutram who bore, and so she was first a nun, and then she became a laywoman for the sake of the medicine. She gave birth to a sangha with someone from a Kshatriya class, and Vasubandhu with a Brahmin. And so he said, you have that same sort of virtue, so you have the same competence, so you shouldn't stay here, you should go back to your own hamlet. And he gave her a prophecy and sent her back. And so she went, I gave back her vows, and she became she became the mother of Panchen Shakya Chokten. And this is described in the stories, the precise account of the biography of Chokten, as well as the illuminative Buddhist teaching. So it's explained in both of these. So that's the eighth history. Now the ninth history is that is in the middle of the 15th century. When Panchen Shakya Chokten was 62, it said that Yama Pachachugna was ordained a bhikshu with Kempo Shakya Chokten as a Kempo. And Chengal Drupjel was the ritual master, the private questioner was Kunjel, and the master assistant was Je Dagmar. The timekeeper was Drungpa Sangwa, and his assistant was Chuje Samtempa. And then they had four other masters who were to fill the Sangha, and they gave the ordination ceremony. And so this is written in the liberation story of Panchen Shakya Chokten called The Illuminator of the Buddhist Teachings. So now this is what I've just said are historical documents that in case that MIKYÖ DORJE actually did give bhikkhuni vows, so these are like the support for that. That's so MIKYÖ DORJE was in the 16th century. In any case, what I've just said are accounts that we can actually read in ourselves that are related to bhikshunis. it's probably understood that there must definitely be many others that account. So just we have not come to our attention yet. And so we need to continue to look for this. I mean, so it's very important for us to continue our research into this. In any case, when we research these above accounts, what we can understand from them is that most of the people who had the bhikkhuni ordination in Tibet in the past were from the high status, either like a lama's lineage or they're from noble families. That's primarily the type of woman it was. Since there is a tradition that the people in the families of lineages or noble families could take a bhikkhuni visit. So, but among the common people, there was not so many people coming from the bhikkhuni vows from the commoners, and so for that reason, this is one reason why they're later. Why the lineage was later broken and the lineage of the bhikkhuni vows are not able to stay in Tibet. So I think that's one hypothesis we can give. Alternatively, it could have been just some other circumstance that the lineage was lost and the bhikkhuni sangha wasn't able to say. So we cannot really say. So we actually need to really continue to research this topic. In any case, before the 16th century, there were bhikshunis in Tibet, and not only were there bhikshunis, but at some one point during that period, there was an equal number of monasteries and nunneries in the region of Wutsang. And so that was the situation. And the way we can know this is that there is a text called The Important Dharma Teachings for Nuns to be Self-Sufficient in the Dharma by KARMAPA. And what it says in this is that in the Pure Land of Wutsang, the monasteries and nunneries are neither more nor less. In some nunneries, the nuns are 300 or 400 in number. There are many nun gurus and discipline masters. They established strong discipline, and the nunneries were good. Thus, most were able to become self-sufficient in the Dharma. I have not heard of such happening here in Kham and Ngomshi. Protectors of Dharma like stars in the daytime. Now, the meaning of this is that when he went to Wutsang, so this is in the 16th century, and at that time, there was really no difference in number between the monasteries and the nunneries. And in particular, the nunneries, in each of the nunneries, are like 300 or 400 numbers. It wasn't just numbers in the tens, they're 300 or 400. In particular, there are also many lamas and discipline masters who were nuns in these nunneries. And they kept good boundaries, and they had a list to prevent humans men from outside coming in to see this. So they're very strong nunneries, and so they're very good. So for us in Kham, so he was Kamachaka was from Kham, right? In my own homeland of Kham and Ngomshi. So these are the reason the area where Kamapacha is, one is the area of Ngomshi. And so this area, there weren't any nunneries with nuns in charge and so forth, and so they didn't have that environment. And so they're extremely rare in that place. Later than that, around in the 7th century, it seems like the Wutsang, there probably is an equal number of monasteries and nunneries. So this is a situation before. And likewise, you also see in many other histories is that many of the Kadampa monasteries in Penyu later were converted to nunneries. And so for this reason, for one period, there was no difference in the number of monks and nuns. And the teachings of the nuns spread very widely. But later there was a great change in the politics in Wutsang. And so then after that, there is so after that, I think there began to be some people started to look poorly at the nuns. They began to have a different. That's when people started to say that when there are nuns, it would harm the teachings and so forth. And so I think this is because there was political changes in Wutsang, and so I think that there was a decline for the nunneries at that time. It was another that, up to the 17th century, though, and during that time, the nunneries were really the nun communities were really very, were flourishing. In any case, if we look at these accounts that I've mentioned before, from the introduction of Bhikshuni vows in Tibet. And so basically from that time, probably about 98% of these Bhikshuni ordinations were formed by the Bhikshu Sangha. That's what the situation was. Generally, when you think about the vows of a laywoman, the vows of going forth, and a novice non-vows may be taken from individuals. They're not taken from the Sangha, they're taken from the individuals. For example, if we take the vows of a laywoman and the vows of novice nuns, they're taken from the female master or the acharya. The vows of going forth are taken from an abbess. Now, the nun in training and the celibate Uvasta and the Bhikshuni vows are taken from the Sangha. For example, with the nun in training, they need to be taken from the Bhikshuni vows. And the celibate Uvasta has to be taken by from the Sangha with an abbess. Now, in the Vinaya, that said that there are 10 different ways to become ordained, fully ordained, and there are 3 that are primarily for women. The first is by accepting the full ordination by accepting the receiving full ordination by accepting the 8 heavy dharmas. The second is a full ordination by messenger, and the third is full ordination by the dual sangha. However, in some regions there was a Bhikshuni community, but no Bhikshuni community. Now there were such places, and so if you give the Bhikshuni ordination with just the male Bhikshu Sangha, is that if you wonder whether there's a way to have the faultless and complete ordination, well, in the minor topics of the Vinaya, there is this this quote. Know that the woman named this went forth of the Bhikshus and was fully ordained and became a Bhikshuni. We have the 8 heavy dharmas, right? The first of these is, so you take when you make your request to the ordinations, that you have to make the request to the male sangha. This is the first of the 8. So this is one reason why it can be taken from the male sangha. Likewise, there was an extensive commentary on the minor topics by Master Gyalek Shenyin, which says, now at that point, when you say that here, when you say it's bhikshus, and this excludes the bhikchunis, basically that means that when the bhikshuni is in the bhikshuni ordination, is only taken from the sangha bhikshus, not from the sangha bhikchunis. Likewise, the auto commentary on the Vinaya Sutra says that if a nun in training is fully ordained with the ritual of bhikshus, and because the Bhikshu Sangha is the primary Sangha, then the gathering of the Bhikshu Sangha is merely in accord with tradition. For example, if you're fully ordained with the male Sangha only, is it a valid motion? It is, because in order to do the full ordination for the Bhikshuni, you generally have to have both the dual Sanghas. However, but the Bhikshu Sangha is the primary one, and so for this reason, the Sangha of male bhikshus alone, if it can also conduct the ordination, and that also becomes a valid motion. Likewise, in Tibet, are the most well-known of the Vinaya commentaries is one by Tsongawa. And so what it says is that there are not 4, well, not I speak so much. If there are no bhikshus not found, it's possible for the male bhikshu sangha to give the precepts to a nun in training. Likewise, it is commonly accepted in the practice of all the 4, the Sakya, Gelu, Kagyu, Nyingpa, the men acting as the abbot for going forth and the master for novice nuns to giving vows. So the male bhikshus give these vows. And so now, if you are unable to receive, if the women are unable to take ordination from men, or if they could receive the ordination, but it wouldn't be faultless and perfect, then there would be no way for women to gain ordination in Tibet. And so, if that were the case, then you have to say that there'd be the danger that we'd have to say that there are no nuns in Tibet. And so that's another point we need to keep in mind. It also says there's a chapter on the rains. Rishad has mentioned that bhikshus would go out to ordain nuns in training in the celibate of Bhavasta. Similarly, in the 5th century, There's an early translation into Chinese. There's an early translation into Chinese of the Sutra of Mahaprajapati. And so this is a very early sutra, and translated this very, very early among the translations into China. And the main point, I don't need to read this, in the future, if after the Buddha passes away, so he's basically saying that because that Mahaprajapati and those who had accepted the 8 heavy dharmas and became adherent, so because they became adherent, so in the future, if there are women who wish to become bhikshunis, what they should do is they should be ordained through the bhikshunism, but they also have to have the ask an answer to the bhikshu sangha. And there are many reasons why this is said. It still depends upon the bhikshunism, so I don't need to go through all of them. However, we said that so many reasons. Then Ananda asked the reason. So if there are all these reasons, isn't it logical for just the bhikshunis, for the abbot and master, just to directly do it? So the bhikshunis don't have to, just the bhikshunis give them. Isn't it okay for the bhikshus to do it only? If the bhikshus themselves are the kempo or the abbot and the master, that's okay for them to do it, right? And they can be the master and abbot for bhikshunis. But in the end, what the Buddha said is, even you can't. It's not. If there are no bhikshunis, then it's logical for bhikshu to sung. So if there are no bhikshunis around, then it's okay for the bhikshu to just give the vows directly. And so this sutra of Mahaprajapati is a very important sutra. It's also a very ancient one. Now, as it is said in the Sutra of Mahaprajapati, in Tibet as well, it seems that this practice was occurring in Tibet in previous time. The reasons because what the Kadampa scholar said, Shervachasam, the Kadampa Master Natan, he wrote that if there are no bhikshunis, then the bhikshus may give all the vows. So in brief, if we want to summarize everything, is if you have not previously taken the nun and training vows, and are ordained as a bhikshuni, you do get the bhikshuni vows. It's not necessarily faultless and perfect, but they do arise. And after you take full ordination as a male, then when your gender changes spontaneously, then the perfect and faultless vows of bhikshuni arise. Likewise, also Buddha Rinpoche said the actual vow arises from the male sangha. It's the actual basis or the actual time of receiving the vows when it's given by the male sangha. And basically, most scholars agree that the bhikshu vows actually arise from the bhikshu sangha. So what it's saying is the actual source from which the bhikshuni vows arise is solely because of the male sangha, not because of the sangha of bhikshunis. And so therefore the lineage of the vows is transmitted from the male sangha, not from the female sangha. And so for this reason, even with a bhikshuni sangha, the bhikshu vows only arise from these monks. Even when there's a dual sangha and both the male and the female sanghas come together and give the vows, it's said that the vows arise from the sangha, right? So when you have the two sanghas, the male and the female sanghas, and among these two sanghas, do you achieve it from both, or do you achieve it from the male sangha, or do you achieve it from the female sangha? Well, you receive it from the male sangha only. And so for that reason, there are times when there are bhikshuni sanghas, you achieve the bhikshuni vows only from the male sangha. And so therefore, then a place such as Tibet, then the vows given by the male sangha, if you wonder how they could possibly be faulty, that's what I wonder. Likewise, in China in the 4th century, the earliest the Dharma first spread into China in the 4th century. It was very early. In Tibet, it was in the 8th century, right? This was in the 8th century. In the 8th century. In China, as the earliest bhikkhuni was in the 4th century. And her name was Jing Qian. And she was the earliest bhikkhuni. And she was probably ordained by Male Sung alone, I believe. Now, it's difficult to find examples of this in India during the time when Buddhism was flourishing in India, because at that time there were both bhikshus and bhikshunis there. And so it's difficult to find a situation where there are bhikshus and bhikshunis. You just can't find any examples of that. But these days, the world is different than it was before. The world has kind of shrunk, where instead of travel has become easier. If there are bhikshus in other regions or other countries, if we want to invite them, we can invite them. And so for that reason, if we invite some bhikshunis from other regions to give the ordination, then I think there's less base of a dispute. I think there are greater benefits to doing so. Now, of course, as a few years ago, even though it can be so that the bhikshuni vows can be given by the male sangha, but that does not necessarily mean that it's best to always give it the male sangha in all situations. Not. If it's possible to have an individual hold the bhikshuni vow, have the bhikshuni sanghas, then if we can have do the bhikshuni vows with both the male and the female sanghas, I think that would be fine. But that's the past history, and when I look at this, and I think it's probably okay. However, there is one thing that there's a little bit of a dispute about. If you have authentic bhikshunis from another country and that comes to give the bhikshuni vows, and then I say that there's less space to do more benefits. So like a few years ago, I did invite a sangha of bhikshus from Taiwan to the sacred site of Bodh Gaya to give the novice nun vows. And so I did have that program or that activity, and it turned out well. And in the future as well, when the epidemic is over and we all can travel easily again, I'd like to do a bhikshu sangha from another country again, to continue those who continue to have the wish to practice, and particularly those who took the novice nuns vows to give them the nun and training vows, then in the future to give them the bhikshuni vows. And for my own self, I'd like to do as much as I can to help this happen. Within our practice lineage of the Karmapa, this topic of the bhikshuni ordination, if you think, is this something that I've decided all by myself? It's not. In the past, during the Kaji Gunshu in Bodh Gaya, all the Khenpos and Geshe-ins, all the students, everyone gathered together and had conferences on the Vinaya. We had several of these conferences. Yeah, we had many very pointed discussions about whether it's appropriate to give for the bhikshu sangha to give them bhikshuni vows and so forth. And at that time, the Khenpos and Geshe said, you should institute the bhikshuni ordination in the Khamsan. And so they told me to do it, and so thus I've been serving them as I was asked to do so. So generally, it's often said that some people do say that if women go forth in the Buddhist teachings, it will shorten the teachings by 500 years. Now, so everyone knows about this. But another thing, we don't know any of the good events, but when there are these bad things to say, then you say one says another, and then everyone hears about them, but no one talks about the good things. But there is this discussion. And so this is talking about, but we never have an opportunity to give an answer. But there was a response to it given in the 2nd century in the Great Exposition, so that we don't have to look for any new answer. We have a Tibetan so when you have an old statue, you don't need to build a new, because it's like so. We already have an answer that was given in the 2nd century, so why would we need to think up a new one? And the answer is that it says, and it's from the 183rd fascicle, the Great Exposition. It says, from the Vinaya, my teachings should remain for over 1,000 years, but it will be shortened by 500 years because of women go forth. And so this is said in the Vinaya. It said it'll be shortened by 500 years. So no, but when we talk about this, what is the Dharma? When he said the Dharma that's during 1,000 years, what Dharma is it we're talking about? But then there's another base thought, another essence. So there's another problem then, another issue. I mean, the reason is that the second time, the reason that the time that this treatise was after the first period of 500 years and in the second 500 years. And so if it's supposed to be 1,000 years and the teachings, but it was already after 500 years and the teachings continue to remain. So why would the Buddha have said this before? If it is only to stay 1,000 years and then that was 500 years of subtracted for it, then it would not stay. So it already stayed over 500 years. So there were 1,000 years it's supposed to say, and so 500 years have been subtracted that because women had gone left, so that would be only 500 years, right? But when the time that the Great Exhibition appeared, the first 5% of 500 is already counted. They're well over 500 years, and there's still the teachings are present. So what's going on? So the Buddha said that the teaching will be shortened by 500 years, so why are the teachings still here? And there are two different answers that were given then, and two different ways to explain this. And then one of them where he says, so at that time, saying that the Buddha would, saying that when we speak about the teachings passing away after 500 years, it's talking about the teachings of stable revelation. It's like it's achieving the result of a stable liberation, that is a result of arhatship. It's not saying that teaching that the period, the duration of the teachings will shorten. It's showing that the period of time when people achieve the arhat result would be described. So some people explain it that way. Others explain it differently. And I think this latter explanation is better. And what they say is that at that time, and so the Buddha, at the time that the women went forth, he had them accept the 8 respectful dharmas. And he said, if you don't accept the 8 respectful dharmas, then the teaching would be shortened diminished by 500 years. But since they did accept the 500 years, and so therefore they did accept the 500 years, the Dharma, true Dharma, will remain for a full 1,000 years. So they gave an answer to this question in the teachings. And so if we don't understand the point that they're speaking about, and we said it's going to be shortened by 500 years, and without any, then I think that this is not actually in accord with the teachings of the scriptures. And so for that reason, the main point here is that in the future, this saying that that Buddha's teachings will stay for 500 years fewer if women go forth, if you need to respond to it, so you need to know the way to respond to it. You need to be able to see, so you need to be able to respond that there's no way, it is inappropriate to say that women going forth harms the teachings and so forth, because it's clearly said in the teachings, because it's clearly said that the women had to accept the 800 women. And at that time, the Buddha had no choice, because at that time in the Indian society, women were at a very low position, were looked down on. And so if the Buddha were to take women and put them in a very high position, then in society, it would change the way people respected and decrease the level of respect that people had for it. And so the Buddha understood this and said that they had to accept the 8 respectful dharmas. And if you accept the 8 respectful dharmas, then it's okay to go forth. And so because of accepting the reforms, I think that then there's no shortening of the teachings by 500 years. And so that's something we need to understand. So I think that is basically the end of the spring teachings, and this is where we'll leave the teachings for today. So now, that's what I thought I should say quite a bit. So I had quite a lot I wanted to say, but my body wasn't feeling so well. I wasn't feeling so well, and so for that reason, the main thing is that within our nunneries, it's important that our nuns are able to do the entire practice of both study and practice. Now, generally, we have both centers of study and centers of practice. We have made them into separate sections. But actually, if for someone who is seeking liberation, study and liberation, as I said before, have to be unified. You have to have the complete. It's not as if someone who's studying is not allowed to practice. Someone who's practicing is not allowed to study. It's like when you have a bird that's flying in the sky. If a bird only uses one wing, it can't fly. So you can't achieve liberation otherwise. So otherwise, you need to have both. You need to have the union of study and practice. So for that reason, in the nunneries, we've begun having studying the studies on the philosophical texts and the areas of knowledge. And studying the text is extremely important. If you don't know the text, if you don't know what you should do and what you should not give, you won't know how to practice. You won't know what you should do or not do. If you don't know how to put things into practice, but say you're going to practice, and how can you do that? That's an idiotic statement. And so if you're going to say you're going to practice, you have to know how to do the practice. For that reason, all the nuns, so not describing, so if we don't just discriminate between the nuns in the study centers, practice centers, they all need to study. Everyone needs to study, whether independent within women in general and with nuns. And in the past, they didn't have so many opportunities. They didn't have opportunities the way monks did. And they had many difficulties with that. And one reason for this is primarily that many of the nuns did not actually take much interest in studying themselves. And basically stayed in the form of nuns and they didn't even start looking for opportunities. So if we absolutely must, it's absolutely important that we read that we study the text and the philosophy. Now, the aim for studying the text and philosophy is in order to practice, in order to tame your own mental continuum, and to be able to bring benefit to other sentient beings. So benefit does not mean helping people with food and clothes and wealth and so forth. It means benefiting them with the wealth. This is the responsibility of all of the Dharma practitioners. So our aim for studying philosophy, for studying texts, is to increase our own practice for our own benefit and being able to bring benefit for others. So it's like, so we have to have that aim. Then when we talk about studying philosophy in Shutter, we think it's like we're going to a school, and we only think of it that way. We think that we're staying in a Dharma community and we're studying, listening, contemplating to Dharma. We don't really feel that, do we? And I don't think that that's good at all. And so I thought I'd like to take this opportunity to say all this here. When you talk about, we need to have it's extremely important for us to have the study, practice, and activity all together. And if we can do this, then in the future, then our nunneries can be like great ornaments for the teachings of Buddhism. And they can be like a great fertile field for the happiness of sentient beings. And so that is that for now. And so now we will have the dedication prayers.
Yeah.
I think after this, don't you have a mandala to offer? You said that you have a mandala offering to make. First, we'll do the mandala offering, then you have some words to say. You said that there is a sentence. So first, the mandala offering. Just a short mandala offering, please. So prepare your mandala offering. Please recite the short one. We don't have time for a long mandala offering. We'll do the short 4-line mandala offering, and you can make your offering. Then following that, then we will have the so after the mandala offering, we'll then have the talk.
Pamejodam dubedam baye gyawa deda lane shebra. Tasadam ba namda jishodam chime bama rejabe nyamba. Geba geba pabe shogenge gyawa deda laya sheba ge sheba gana lame gyaje. Deda gyawa damje laya me sambo jela debe dada ge gyawa gunla shanze sheba. 月下写单地莫忘给你略当阿当地心一给呀地巴大给一巴机械巴的大当真大给说是。秋菊叫我滚到三给在让给南大老大没老大找我滚给说那么讲了。得到滚给结束大爷了，看到秋菊几点准备到上学人不了三给马上。 公布的大给当家了，过了那南没把个，两年的都感谢的到，若跟了北京的这个把心给对你说吧，大给他们让着说也想着我的学习小吧，结束也让贵心说。 给我就是大概介绍吧，当街大概讲究见我。 昨天必须就些没多的，这是白领些年的研发的商业行动没得标啊。如果能大行了，这把它说也他们古罗人那们的了，看你呀大呀咪。 一切没这上坡的别别想说，那么老百姓民众些的所谓的些恐怕到发达是把民主希望人民，难怪两边找难着我说，全我先别眨眼呢，东爱身边大件先给把些话上面。 确定自己属于了解全我先别眨眼呢，东爱身边大件先给把些话上面说，确定自己属于了解全我先别眨眼。 东爱身边大件先给把些话上面说，确定自己属于了解。 放电了没？下边电把它看你们用了的一种啊，大型马驴搓啥这上，牛肚三个啥啷个把它修？他说。 到底接了的送线哪去什么的？送线哪有？
And now we have a talk following this, right? I believe that there is one. So please now say from Palpum Chachudim. I'm sorry, the sound is not clear enough to give a good English translation.
Rinula danda di kunza ki microphone di zoom nal gyumidu.
केवा मिंदो दादी केवा मिंदो और तारांग गए हो ना जिसरे तेज कोडो
In general terms, she is thanking His Holiness for giving the teachings that are especially beneficial at this time, teachings about the lives of MIKYÖ DORJE and the other great Kaju masters. And at this time, it comes to them like receiving teachings right when they need them, just like the rains falling in time. She's expressing her thanks for His Holiness for giving these teachings to the nuns and the shudders, as well as to the entire Karma Kamsung, and expressing her wishes that His Holiness may live a long life. So we'd like to ask His Holiness to continue giving these teachings, the spring teachings, the audio Chima spring teachings, in the future, continue to be our protector and our refuge and champion. So wish that the Karmapa and all the Kaju masters may remain above our heads as ornaments above a crown.
다음 다 자신만 하면 쏘잖아. 자신만.
Now we will recite the aspiration for Mahamudra.
Ngona suta ta de le kama de la ta ga do da